This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Aurora Winter, best-selling author. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing just awesome. It's great to be on the show with you, Phantom.
Well, thank you for being here. We love having new guests all the time. We talk to all types of creative people. Want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You see the icon up there. If people use the coupon code GHOST, they can check it out. It's an audio-only platform, but we are a featured podcast. So if you use that coupon code of GHOST, you can check it out later tonight. And we also have your Magic Mystery and the Multiverse.com up as a URL that will be clickable. That was the URL we were given. If you have a different URL you want to give to the audience for your general website, we can do that later in the show. But thank you again for being a guest on the show.
Oh, well, it's great to be here, and I look forward to helping the audience turn their words into wealth and also create a little bit more magic in their life, as you had on the bottom there. I'm the author of a fantasy series called Magic Mystery and the Multiverse, and I'm launching it on Kickstarter. So if you like supporting creators, go to Kickstarter, search Magic Mystery and the Multiverse, and you can follow. I'm launching it next month, so you don't have to buy anything. You can just follow and find out more about this young adult fantasy series. And then I'm well known for another award-winning book I wrote, which is Turn Words into Wealth, which is behind me there.
That's interesting because you have a fancy novel and kind of like a how-to book is typically like authors, we can get into it like different lanes, like a musician, like we have different lanes. So you could be like a jazz musician, you could be a punk musician, but usually you're not both.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, like it's very interesting when I find people that have different, like are in different genres or different styles. That's interesting.
It's so much fun. Like my background is actually in film and television. I fell in love with writing at the age of 9 when I read C.S. Lewis's The Narnia series, and I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I'm like, I want to be an author. Authors are like wizards. I thought it was magical to be able to transport somebody to another place and time with just little dots of ink on white paper. I'm like, I want to do that when I grow up. And then many years later, I went into film and television. I oversaw 250 hours of television programming. I had a development budget of $1.5 million. I was working for Canada's largest film and television production company. And then later, I reinvented myself. I'm the founder of Same Page Publishing. I've written about a half a dozen nonfiction books on various topics. I love helping other people create and publish and promote books. And then finally, after when COVID hit, I'm like, Aurora, what about that dream of writing a fantasy book like C.S. Lewis, like the Narnia series?
Oh, wow. So that's
then I finally did write Magic Mystery and the Multiverse. So
that's awesome.
The first book actually is a winner of the American Fiction Awards, Best Preteen Book 2023. It also won the Reader's Choice Award, Best Teen Book 2023, and it was just awarded the UK Wishing Shelf Award for Best Teen Book, or it's a finalist for Best Teen Book. So getting awards from around the world.
That's awesome. I love talking to creative people. I started the podcast talking to musicians and singer-songwriters and authors. And then we kind of moved to different folks, but all people who can be considered creators or creative type people. And I always find it's interesting to talk to creative people because they have this kind of ability to channel, the inside and the outside. That's always been interesting to me, like how people create their worlds, like the way you create a world with your books.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons I was so looking forward to talking to you, Phantom, because you've got that creative, energy, you've got that vibe, you kind of understand that world. And so it would probably make sense to you. Like, yes, I think Magic Mystery and the Multiverse is fun and lighthearted and action-packed. It's kind of like, Doctor Who meets Harry Potter because they've got a multiverse adventure, but the kids are young wizards. So if people like, Percy
Marvel,
Jackson.
Yeah, you mix a little Marvel in there with the low Doctor Who, and I'm kind of a fan of the old Doctor Who with the rainbow scarf.
Who's your favorite Doctor?
The guy with the rainbow scarf. His name escapes me, but it was like the guy who was playing it in the 80s.
That's one of the longest running series ever. I'm a big fan of David Tennant. He's like amazing, and I also loved him in Good Omens, which he was just brilliant in.
I used
Anyway,
to
if you
watch it on
go, yeah,
PBS.
if you go to the URL that's on the screen there, magicmysteryandthemultiverse.com, you can see the reviews for the book. You can click on a link and you can get it on Amazon. Or most importantly, follow me on Kickstarter, because book number 2, The
Kickstarter.
Secret
Yeah, you need to get there.
Multiverse Academy, is coming out soon. And Kickstarter is so cool because, as a creator, you want to give your fans something extra. And with Kickstarter, I can give beautiful hardcover books. I just looked at the cover art for the characters. I have individual cover art that's, above and beyond what you normally see in a book. We can give bookmarks. We can have fancy schmancy hardcovers that are above and beyond.
You have your
You got the merch.
Yeah.
Exactly. So go to Kickstarter, magicmysteryandthemultiverse.com, and just follow. You don't have to buy anything. I'll be grateful. I'm trying to get 250 followers before I launch next month. And so any followers would be super helpful. But you'd probably relate to this, Phantom. The reason behind the book is kind of like what motivates you to do a particular song, right? The audience loves the song, they love the tune, they love the lyrics, but there's a reason really why you probably did that.
Why you wrote
particular,
it.
Yeah. And so for me, I started writing Magic Mystery and the Multiverse during COVID. And what was really frosting me was the censorship and the cancel culture and the people who were like blasted into oblivion because the powers that be thought that they were wrong without any evidence necessarily. You're going down, you're being canceled. And so the evil people in Magic Mystery Multiverse are censors instead of an evil queen or an evil king.
Yeah, there's a lot of that today. So many different camps. Well, because I kind of grew up, I'm a child of the 70s and I like a lot of 60s music and listening to like Frank Zappa, and he used to rail about that. But Zappa used to, he used to say whatever he wanted to say and however he wanted to say it. And then people wanted to come down on him and say, wait, it's bad for the youth. It's bad for this, it's bad for that. But, the idea of having creative freedom is it's like, if you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. You don't
like it, you don't have to buy it. I'm in Los Angeles right now. My son and I went to see Eliza Schlesinger in the Netflix is a Joke festival, which is really fun. And she's like, if you don't like what I say, you don't have to laugh. You don't have to come, but don't cancel comics. I mean, the whole point is it's kind of in your face.
like with Richard Pryor, he would have got canceled. It's like all the great comics is like they always kind of push it. It's like you're going to push the envelope because, like any art, like any great musician, Hendrix. When he first started doing feedback, the recording engineer, he was, "Oh, we don't do that." And he said, "Yes, you do. Yes, you do." He went on the board to make sure it was there. So a lot of times, if you're an innovator, you have people who control the canon, right? They control the structure, and they say, "Well, you can't do this, you can't do that." But like you wouldn't have a Bob Dylan if you have to have perfect pitch, right?
Exactly.
You can kind of break the rules. You can break the rules.
And what I do I'm now the founder of Same Page Publishing, and how I help people publish books is I interview them. And people need to figure out what they really care about by talking. We don't have our ideas all formed up in our head and then blurt them out. No, it's a process. And so not allowing free speech is shutting down thinking. God knows we need the best thinking we can have. Yeah, it shuts down everything. Because the best idea comes.
The algorithms, we got these algorithms that just censor things because of keywords.
Yeah.
Like all this social media. And if you're trying to, it's like, I might be trying to say something and you just pick something totally out of context.
Yeah.
And now I'm shadow banned. I'm like, well,
exactly.
Well, why, you need to allow people to express themselves. And if you only wanted to see, the cat video with the same song that everybody hears, that's fine. Maybe that's what's acceptable, is to just do that. But there's other things beyond that.
Exactly right. Have you had any troubles yourself with being banned or canceled?
My music is very experimental and sometimes it's explicit. And I actually have characters that I create. I create like a female version of myself.
Yeah, I saw that.
Josephine Electric. And and sometimes like some of her stuff gets banned. And sometimes, some of my music gets put, like the algorithm won't work. Right. Because I pushed the envelope in some direction, or I did something that's a little punk aesthetic, or is it not, it's distortion, or it's discordant, or it's not, or it's too long. Because the thing today, we're living in a world where people say the songs should only be like 2 minutes, 1 minute, 80 seconds. And
But
you're
that's
like,
the difference between art and commerce. Like commerce
yeah,
always
how do
plays
I?
within the box. But if you want to be an artist, you got to push the envelope. And yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, to
But
me, a song's gonna open up like into yes, I'm listening to Close to the Edge. I'm listening to a song that goes for like 18, 20 minutes. Or like Genesis, like
wow.
nobody wants to give time to those type of progressive rock or jazz. But there are places that still do, but there's so many people that have these formulas today that say, well, unless
Yeah.
it's in this, you can't even be there. And I'm like, really? Like,
What's
how would we
your
ever have Hotel California if you had that? You would never get it out.
exactly? You never get it out. What's your favorite work of art that you are working on now, or that you've actually performed or published,
um,
released?
my favorite song I ever published.
Yeah.
I got a lot of songs that I've written a lot, but one of the songs I really like a lot that I wrote is a song that I put out as a single. It was supposed to be part of a project
Uh-huh.
called Dark Ghost, and I never put it out. But I put the single out called "I Want to Share a Fifth with You," and I like
Mm.
that song so much. And a lot of people, other musicians, have actually told me they like it. I got to work with a couple people because of it. But
Hmm.
it's weird. Like I have so many songs. It's like different. If you ask me a different day, I might come up with a different one. But
Yeah.
that one today is uh, kind of, on my
That's
top of my head.
resonant in your heart and head. Well, that's pretty cool. Nice. Anyway, I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and one of the things he always says is you cannot shut down speaking without shutting down thinking.
Yeah.
And that's really true. The neuroscience of it. So, the whole cancel culture and the whole, shutting down or canceling people for saying something that's outside of somebody's idea of what's perfect ends up shutting down thinking. And we cannot afford to shut down our best thinking. And we need conflict. Conflict is not a problem. That's how the best ideas get worked out. I think conflict or debate is kind of like, the ocean working on a rocky shore. It rolls the rocks back and forth, and the rocks eventually get smoothed out and they get beautiful, and eventually they turn into sand. There's value in the settling out process. We don't need to come up with the best idea out the gate, and it's impossible anyway.
Well, it's like a happy accident. The way I look at I like to record in a process, kind of stream of consciousness, kind of
Yeah.
flow state. And there's a lot of people that want to just take, in our world now, we got like AI, we have sampling, we have all these digital audio workstations, and there's this tendency to try to clone what worked. And music
Yeah.
is based on your impressions, right? If I'm a musician, I might be pulling something from a John Coltrane song. I might pull
Hmm.
something from John Lennon. I might pull something from a punk band like the Ramones.
Right.
It's
Right.
not that I'm pulling it note for note. I'm pulling the feeling of it.
Yes,
But
exactly.
today, people want to pull note for note
Ah,
exactly what that was
that's
instead of
plagiarism.
actually. Yeah, to me, it's not. It's not. It's like or use AI to take somebody's voice and make them sing something they never sang, and they think that's
Yeah.
creative because they did a prompt to say, "Well, have Bob Marley sing something he never sang." It's like, well, I don't know if that's really what you should do with your time. Why don't you
Yeah,
try to
exactly.
actually do something unique?
But what you were just saying, Phantom, is just the definition of creativity. You take something from here and something from there and something from here and something from there, and then you put it together, the feeling of it, not just copying the exact words or the exact notes. And that synthesis, that is the definition of creativity. That is creativity. And like sometimes my clients come to me and they're like, oh, this idea isn't original, or I'm not original. It's like, no, if your idea was 100% completely original, it probably sucks because if it's that original and never
Yeah,
been done in any form whatsoever like that, it's probably a bad idea.
yeah, you
Because
always
usually
pull
the
from
best
something.
ideas are like, well, like my book, it's Harry Potter meets Doctor Who. Okay, we can sort of get the flavor of that. That's
Yeah, in
but
books
you
you need
combine
that,
it,
right?
it's different. Yeah.
You need that with the audience in the books, right? Because books you kind of have to pick up on what readers are into.
Yeah.
So if there's a whole audience on Harry Potter, there's a whole audience on these other things, but you have the synthesis of like, here's your vision of how that fantasy works. And so
Exactly.
you're in that genre, just like any blues musician, right? There's always the Delta blues is kind of a form,
Uh-huh.
right? But how somebody does it is different. Like if I actually had Jimi Hendrix play Red House versus Stevie Ray Vaughan play Red House, it's the same song, but how they did it
Yeah,
is not the same at all.
it would be
It's not the same at all.
completely different
Totally
flavor.
different interpretations.
And the other thing that's different about Magic Mystery and the Multiverse compared to Harry Potter and Doctor Who is that it's got a female lead because I'm a girl.
Yeah, is that something that you find that is
Yeah.
challenging
So
to have a
why
female
does Harry
protagonist?
Potter have to be like a boy? So yeah, so my Harry Potter is a girl named Anna, and she's 13 years old, and she lives in Los Angeles, California, where I'm from, and she wants to be an actress. So she's studying theater, and she's all about learning how to mimic her voice, which can come in a little handy later. And she's a complete optimist, so she never imagines what could go wrong. And then her brother, Zachary, is the opposite. He's only 11 years old. He's recovering from cancer. While she's athletic and optimistic, he is frail and pessimistic, and he always thinks what could go wrong, and often it does. And then they get sent by their father off to go to boarding school in England, and they stay with their genius uncle, who is, of course, a mad scientist. And he says, okay, I have to go out, but you can explore anywhere in the mansion. Just leave that experimental car alone, a little Back to the Future esque. And of course, they cannot leave the experimental car alone, and they go out in the parallel universe pod, and they end up on a completely other universe because it's a multiverse adventure. So they have to. And of course, they run out of hydrogen. It's a hydrogen fueled vehicle as soon as they arrive. So that's it. They have to find their way home. And as soon as they arrive, they get instant friends and instant enemies. The forces of evil are definitely out to annihilate and kill them. But the forces of good are thinking, hey, that Anna might be the chosen one, and that she looks like the person who was prophesized to come and save them from the evil tyrants that rule with an evil hand. So, mwahaha, we shall see if she manages to do that. And along the way, she meets, like, there's such fun characters in the book. Kirkus Reviews gave it a great review. They said it was superb, especially all of the characters, and especially that Anna and Zachary were a superb duo. So there's a talking dog, there's vampires, there's dwarves, there's elves, there's other imaginary characters that you've never seen before. So I had a lot of fun, and I think anybody who likes a fantasy adventure romp will really enjoy it. It's not
Did you model?
dystopian. I didn't want
Yeah,
it to be like dark
art.
and
Yeah,
Hunger Gamesy. So, the stakes are high, but everything's going to turn out. Oops, I guess I shouldn't tell that. But
oh,
you
no,
have the feeling, like
yeah.
Doctor Who, it's going to be
Don't-
okay in the end.
But when you came up with your protagonist, is she modeled kind of on like any particular person? Is it part of you or other people
I
you
think
built up?
all of the characters are part of me. Like, I just zone in on the part of me that's always optimistic, and then I zone in on the part of me that's always a pessimist. But yeah, I did have a few, people that I've met who I stole character traits from and exaggerated them. So yeah, I think it's really fun. Like, I think that the interesting characters, we want to put them in a high stakes world and an interesting world, but then what I really love is that the characters are so different. So, in the second book, which is being launched on Kickstarter, which is not available yet anywhere else, has a vampire who's very torn about his need to drink blood. He's very conflicted about that, and has not succumbed to drinking from humans, although he finds them quite tempting and tasty. And then there's a dwarf, or a guy who claims to be a dwarf and claims to be the prince of dwarves, but he's 6'4". So there's something weird about his backstory, which we'll have to find out. And then the most powerful wizard does not have a college education, so she's a woman, but she uses very common words. Is a little rough around the edges, and smokes a pipe. So I really had fun with it. I think
So when
readers will
you
too.
when you develop like your novel, do you have your plot like the first thing that you come up with is the overall concept of the book, or is your character design like the first thing, or is it kind of like every project is different in how things come along, like how you actually got
You
to
know,
work an
I
idea?
I started with plot. You know, I'm used to writing I've written a lot of nonfiction books, and I thought, oh, I'm really good at plotting. But 12 drafts later, I discover I am partly a discovery writer. So as like it took me 4 drafts before the characters kind of felt alive to me. They were like kind of moving around like wooden characters. And then after about 4 drafts, they had their own opinions and their own things they wanted to say and do. So I'm like, okay, they're finally alive. And then they wanted me to rewrite right from the beginning. So I did that. Um, yes, I would like to say that I'm like Stephen King and it just comes out, you know, beautifully 1 draft, but no, 12 drafts later. And then I send it off to the editor to have the proofreading and all the spell checking done and stuff like that.
When
But
you
the end result is I'm proud of it.
when you come up with dialogue, is a lot of the dialogue I've talked to authors where sometimes the dialogue comes from like a flow state, stream of consciousness. Once they've kind of keyed in to the frequency of their character, they kind of become like a method actor and they like it just starts to flow out, or do you have to like kind of plot it out, or does like the
Uh,
dialogue come
I
out that
guess
way
it
for you?
depends because I feel like writing is, you know, 50% inspiration and 50% sticking at the seat where you're writing, no matter how you're feeling, and just
Mhm.
doing it. So on those days when I'm not feeling inspired, I will just write placeholder dialogue. Like it does the job, but it might not have the right flavor. And the days when I am inspired, then, you know, they have this witty repartee. But I also make myself an Excel spreadsheet. I'm also a coach, so I've studied psychology and I understand people. I understand how to analyze people. Like I like, you know, what are the Clifton strengths of somebody or the disc or whatever, or the Enneagram. So for example, the best friend character, Mystic is her name. She babbles. She sees everything through the lens of people. So everything is all about connection. It's about how are other people reacting. She just babbles. That's her way of talking.
Mhm.
Anna, who's our hero, she's very decisive. She's like action oriented. She doesn't babble. She wants to do stuff, right? And then there's a shy character. Her name is Ellipsis. Yes, I'm having fun with her name. And she starts almost every sentence with Okay, authors find this amusing. Ellipsis. Get it? Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So, but I also have this huge Excel spreadsheet because I got some dwarfs in there. So they say dwarfish things like hammer and anvil, and you know, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they have their little catchphrases, so to speak, that they say. So I have to always check in on the dwarf language because it doesn't come to me naturally.
Is fiction
Oh.
really your fiction and fantasy like your real passion? Because I know
Well,
you were into nonfiction books like Turn the World Words into Wealth, but it seems like you're very passionate about like the creative kind of nature of like fantasy and fiction.
I'm supercharged about fantasy and fiction. And I also think that the hope is in the next generation. So if I can write books that will be read by young adults or by people who still have a lot of hope in their heart, who are not part of the whole, you know, cancer culture, that will be my contribution to society. Like my dream is that my life will matter because I impact people just a little bit to go just in a little bit more
Mhm.
towards the light or more towards creativity or more towards affirming choices. And I do that through, I'm hopefully through Magic Mystery and the Multiverse, and because it has really good values in there. I think that one of the values that really matters to me that we don't see enough of, in my opinion, is the love and loyalty between siblings. So Anna
Mhm.
and Zachary look after each other on this adventure. Anna is stronger, she's the elder. So often she's looking after her brother, who is weak and frail and just recovering from cancer. But in a surprise twist, he has a moment of heroism and he's the one who saves the day. And you're like,
Wow.
holy moly, I did not see that coming. That was a spoiler alert. But I wanted to write that scene because I think
It was
we've
unexpected.
it's unexpected, but also we think so much about romantic love and sometimes about love between friends, but the loyalty and love between
Oh,
family that
family,
could
yeah.
be
It's not
for
really.
life, and that
Yeah, that's
really
not addressed as
matters.
much. Yeah, because it's like I guess it's people are more into like the romantic romance novel vision,
Yeah.
rather than dealing with. There's this whole other dynamic between brothers and sisters and family members that you don't like. Are you not going to see that unless you're dealing with like organized crime families? So you
That's
see
right.
stuff like that. You see like Godfather and Goodfellas type of things.
Exactly.
You're like, yeah, you see behavior there, but like, what is it for real?
Yeah,
Not
so
even
I wanted to celebrate that and lift that up. And I think, kids have fights, but that doesn't mean that they don't love each other. And I thought, parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles probably want to encourage siblings to get along. And then I also think it's very easy to fall into the habit of underestimating somebody. Like Anna,
Mhm.
who's more athletic and elder, kind of underestimates her brother. But in the end, he turns out to be surprisingly strong and not physically strong, but strong in bravery and heroism, and totally saves the day in a surprising way. Another theme that really matters to me is the environment. So I thought, well, what part of the environment would I like to highlight that we don't think about very much? So as a child, I suffered terribly from asthma and allergies, and I was hospitalized a number of times. I had to be under the oxygen tent. My fingers turned blue, and I sounded like Darth
Mhm.
Vader. I couldn't breathe. And so I wanted to highlight the value of oxygen because I think, we talk about the rainforest, we talk about the oceans, we talk about species going extinct, but do we really think that much about air? Not so much. So I wanted to highlight that. And so the evil censors are from yet another planet, which is something I could do in a multiverse. And they're going to steal all of the air from the planet that Anna and Zachary happen to land on
Oh, wow.
because they blew up their own planet. They
They can
destroyed
steal
the
it. They can steal
atmosphere.
it.
So they're like, we're just going to steal all of your atmosphere. Never mind, it's going to kill all life on the planet Telesora. And so that was fun for me because I wanted to highlight the value of oxygen and dramatize the value of air. And how better to do it than having an evil species from another planet come and just all the
Well,
air.
are they
So
not human, so they don't value humans, or are they a different type of human?
they're not really human, no.
Wow.
So they don't
Wow.
care about you.
You don't care about it. I like the way they kind of see humans on like an ant.
Yeah. Something to be exploited anyway, even better than an ant, you can exploit it. So I had
Oh,
fun with that as well. So I think that hidden within the action-packed adventure are some themes that have good values. Actually, the book number 2, which isn't even released yet, is number 1 today on Amazon for values for teen books that have good values or something like that. It's always changing. Every hour, Amazon changes the algorithm or changes the rankings. But at the moment I looked at it before coming on here, it was number 1.
but one question I had about like having a female protagonist, does that make it harder in the fantasy world to market just because typically the characters aren't female, or does that give you an advantage because you're different, have a different protagonist than normal?
I think that the pendulum has swung the other way, and now there's a lot of female protagonist stories. But I think, I've studied Joseph Campbell, perhaps you have as well, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, all of the, power of myth and the traditional archetype. There is something to the hero archetype being a male, be, not necessarily being a man, but being a male archetype. Like it's
Hmm.
more outgoing, it's more action oriented. And if you think
Hmm.
of a female archetype, not a woman, but a female archetype, the yang and the yin of it, is more
Yeah, yeah,
receptive, right?
yeah.
So
So
that is a
not
bit of
what
a
people expect.
trouble having a female heroine. So I
Do
think
you
it's
have
just
to
kind of a
make them have
tomboy.
more male, more tomboy, more male
Yeah,
qualities, or do
I
you
think
try to
so.
try to actually accentuate the feminine and say, well, there's nothing wrong with having a leader that has this point of view versus the male point of view.
There's nothing wrong with it, but I'm more of a tomboy, so I went with the tomboy
You
because
with
that
the
was
tomboy.
accessible.
Yeah, it's more, but yeah, you understand the market. And
Yeah,
also what they're trying to tell the story. And if
yeah,
a story needs a more action oriented person, because you're saying she's decisive and she's more decisive than her brother. So
Decisive
that's
or impulsive, but yes.
awesome. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And
Because like telling the story also, I thought that was like how fiction can influence reality. You know, I'm a big fan of like Rod Serling, what he used to do, and Gene
yeah.
Roddenberry,
Oh, Gene
what they were
Roddenberry, for
able to
sure.
what they were able to do with science fiction and actually make comments about, you know, the today at the time.
And
They would
they influenced today and the future at at the time. So Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek, like Lieutenant Uhura, a female black officer on the bridge.
yeah,
That was a
big.
big deal. But they didn't say, "Oh, by the way, she's like," no, they just did it,
Yeah,
and it just was like
just
so
did it.
cool. They just did it. 'Cause it's like, oh, that's normal, so we're just doing it, and I just love that. Of course, books like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451 or Animal House, like I think books can change reality by either pointing out something that we need to be aware of that's going terribly wrong, or even by pointing out some things that could go right. Like I think Harry Potter, firstly, made a whole bunch of people read who were not reading. So that's a wonderful accomplishment. Thank you, J.K. Rowling. But also, Harry Potter did uplift the value of friendship.
Mhm.
Like the trio, Hermione and Ron and Harry. They stuck together. They solved problems together. So that had a nice influence. And then also
Teamwork, yeah.
hidden behind that story is that a mother's love is forever, even if mother is dead, which is kind of cool.
Well, I
What
think the
about
great thing about reading is that you get into a world
yeah,
that is like not kind of it's not like the way film is, where film is sending you an image and you can interpret it. But when you read, you don't have the sensory of the sound and the visuals. You read the words and then you get the painting shows up in your,
yeah,
and it's like with music. I talk about sound paintings. If you
yeah,
listen to a song, it can recall to that listener like their individual, response to it. And as a songwriter, you wrote that song to mean X, but the person who heard it, they think it means Y because
yeah.
they actually interpret it. But when you read, I mean, it has the same effect, but it's like it's words on a page, so it's more direct.
I think songs and music are very direct. They bypass the cerebral cortex and just hijack your heart. So that's pretty incredible what you do. But I like what you're saying. Yes, reading is more. This is an interesting tidbit. Did you know that actually watching TV is so passive that it tends to put your brain in a depressed state? But reading the same material does not do the same thing because your brain is active for exactly the reason that you just said, Phantom. People are creating their own images from the words on the page. So it's active. Reading is active, watching TV is passive. And therefore, when people read, they don't get depressed in the way that if they watch too much TV, they may want to watch out for that because it's
Yeah.
too passive. Yeah.
Well, it's good to just involve your brain. Today we got so many people tied to our devices, right? So
Yeah.
they're just getting triggered by the latest social media post and quick, quick little tidbits like 30 seconds, 90 seconds, 120 seconds. Where reading makes you have to get into a book, could be 200, 300, 400, 500 pages.
Yeah.
And today, you got to get that audience that's used to these really short things. They're triggering responses where it's not that deep. It's like what I said with music. Music is being cut down to like 2 minute songs when we used to be able to have songs that go up to 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
I
Now
know. It's just amazing.
the
Well,
attention span. How do you like deal with the lack of attention?
so how I dealt with that is that the chapters in are very short in Magic Mystery and the Multiverse. So they're usually just a couple of pages. So hopefully it's like potato chips. You're like, well, I could read one more chapter. Right. And
That's really
I try to have each chapter
different
end on kind
strategy.
of like, oh, what's gonna happen next? A little bit of a cliffhanger. The other thing I like about books compared to social media, for example, is that generally speaking, books inspire us to be our best selves. Like as we're reading about a hero in a story, and the hero is, I don't know, slaying dragons or rescuing damsels in distress or being a damsel, rescuing a knight, I don't know, whatever they're doing. we are subtly invited to be our best selves, not couch potatoes, not just consumers, but also creators. And also we're inspired to be heroic. And the thing that I love about stories, I might get choked up here because this really matters to me. Like, I know that you cannot decide how to live a good life just from data. Numbers alone do not tell us how to live a good life. You have to ask a question, and then numbers can help you answer that question, or a scientific study can help you answer that question. But behind that, there has to be a value, a set of values of how do you want to live your life. And I believe that stories are the DNA of humanity trying to convey to the next generation how to live a good life, or warnings, tales of how not to live a good life. Don't go that way, go that way. And so, just like our genetic DNA is so valuable and we pass it on to our heirs, and if it's faulty, then that doesn't go so well. But if it's strong, it does go well. The strongest, most interesting stories have some momentum. They attract us because in some ways they're signaling important things that we really need to know as a species: how to live a good life, things to avoid, traps, etc. And that's why I'm a storyteller. I think it's fun, but it's also important.
I think it's real important because, as a songwriter, we're storytellers too. And like a lot,
Yeah.
what we try to do is just convey life. And I think a lot of human beings really learn from their oral history method, going back to the beginning of human beings, relaying these stories before they wrote them down and doing oral histories. And
Yeah.
when you are able to get into that world of that story,
Yeah.
then you start to build up your reference list of all these concepts. And if
Yes.
you're only getting like numbers and really short bits of data, you're not getting the big picture. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you take an SAT versus doing a blue book, right?
Exactly.
You do the blue
Exactly.
book, and the professor wants you to actually tell me what you learned this semester and put it in your own words. Don't just pick A, B, C, D, E. That
Yeah.
means you had to actually have processed all those things and be able to actually bring them
And you
back.
synthesized it.
Yeah,
Exactly right. Exactly right, Phantom. That's right on the money. And so important and so useful. And also, you might find this interesting, or you perhaps know this, but your listeners don't. I read a great book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess by Leonard Schlein. If you want book recommendations, come to me. I read lots of books and I love them. And one of the things that really stood out to me, you mentioned a moment ago, the oral storytelling tradition that humanity's had for Kuhn's age. When we tell stories, as we're telling them right now in this audio or video format, it triggers a holistic part of the brain, and people receive the whole message. But the process, this is why the book's called The Alphabet versus the Goddess. The goddess is that whole brain that thinks of the story as a whole, or hears the music as a whole. Even the process of breaking things down into words, letters and words that go linearly across the page and then you turn the page, actually tends to reinforce a fragmented way of thinking.
hmm.
So there is value. This is why I love doing podcasts or doing videos. There's a lot of value in connecting with people in a video or audio format, because then they get the flavor of what we're about. They hear your voice, they hear my voice, they hear our passion, they hear the flavor of our enthusiasm, right? They get so much more out of it. They get a holistic message. So even though I love the words on a page, I think the words on a page are always struggling to be as powerful as the story told around the campfire.
Do you do like audiobooks because of that?
Yes, I do audiobooks. I'm looking for the audio narrator for the fantasy series right now. I got to admit, haven't done that yet, but there's so many great voices out there. Yes. I'm not going
Yeah,
to
so just
narrate
like
it. I
just
want a
sometimes you have to,
professional.
well, you want to actually have actors voice the characters rather than you voicing like you're using your own voice.
Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah. So that's that.
But it's just
But
every artist has their own vision. So I think it is hard to, like, if you have a lot of characters, to kind of voice all those characters without having like
yeah,
voice acting.
yeah. And that it takes quite a specific voice talent. Stephen Briggs, I think, is one of the best audio narrators. He can narrate a Terry Pratchett book, and he's got all the different voices, and they sound so distinct, but it's just
Yeah.
one guy. He didn't have a
He
whole
has the talent of
ensemble.
an actor. That's why they're
So
actors.
exactly.
But
But for those of your audience who might want some tips about their own writing, my book Turn Words into Wealth helps them with that. It covers the neuroscience of communication, which we partly started talking about here. I think a lot of people just make common mistakes about communication that sabotage their success. We could maybe get into that a little bit if you'd like. And then in the book Turn Words into Wealth, I cover 7 different ways to make 7 figures with your $1 million message, so to speak. Because one thing that weighed on my heart, I was helping people with their books through my publishing company, Same Page Publishing. And a lot of people, before they came to me, they'd spend 3 years writing a book and they're like, okay, I'm ready to publish it. And I'm like, well, just hang on a second here. Have we tested the title? Have we tested the subtitle? Do you have a call to action? Do you have a website? Is there some way that people can play with you who want more? And most people hadn't given any thought to those things. And, the change in direction, it takes you 3 years to write your book. Hopefully it doesn't take that long, but on average, first-time authors take 3.5 years to write a book. Don't drop the ball at the finish line. Make sure your website is ready. Make sure for those people who want more that you've got events or you're available as a speaker or you have extra education if it's nonfiction book, and test the title. Don't just push the book out with the title that you first thought of. Maybe that's not the best title. Like the book title you see behind you, Turn Words into Wealth. I had many other titles and I tested them, and that was the winner. Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse. I had complaints because I thought that is a very long title, but I tested it against other titles, and I had teens and young adults and teachers and librarians vote on the title, and Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse kept winning. So I'm like, okay, you guys are right. I guess I like the alliteration too. Just it's a little bit longer title than I normally would like, but it works. So
I think it seems like a lot of artists, they focus on the art, but then it's like in this world where you have to market, they forget about, the things you're talking about. They forget about the SEO. They forget about the title. They forget about like the cover. They don't do enough work on the other aspects of getting their art to the people. And
exactly.
sometimes it's like, well, I don't really do that. I'm the person who does the art. But then, like, well, in order to be successful, you have to have all the pillars, right? And if
Yeah.
you just
And
have
you
one of them, then you're not going to have the rest.
and you don't want to just sabotage yourself at the finish line. Like I was so pleased to find this cover artist, who did this cover, Triff Designs. And it took me a while to find him, but I looked for other fantasy books that I liked the cover, and then I looked inside and I saw who did the cover, and then I looked at their website, and then I contacted them, and it was a whole process. But I thought, hey, no, why not hire a professional cover designer who does this work in this YA fantasy genre, and he's done a brilliant job. He's done 3 covers for me now, and he'll do all the covers as long as he's alive and I'm alive. He's my cover guy for the fantasy series. But people, go ahead.
I was looking at your book, and there's this concept called super credibility, and I was wondering, like, that's interesting. Like, what does that mean in the context of how you framing that?
Super credibility. Well, I think, I'm going to put my nonfiction hat on to answer this question. So I help a lot of experts and entrepreneurs and thought leaders step up to the next level. And I think to have super credibility, you need the trifecta. You have to have a book, you have to have a business, and you have to be a speaker. So being a speaker means you're articulate on podcasts like this one with you, Phantom, or on a TED Talk or on a platform. But in order to get access to that level, you have to have a book. Sorry, that's just how it works. It's just like to operate on somebody in an OR, you have to have the MD. The root word of authority is author. So if you want to be an authority, you have to be an author. Very rare exceptions to that rule. So, and then having a business, to have super credibility just makes sense, right? Because it also makes financial sense. But if you are solving a problem or offering a solution to the world, or you want to be a force for good, you're just one person can only do so much. So I think that super credibility has got those three roots. What about you? Would you define it differently?
No, it sounds like the pillars I would think you
Yeah,
need. They make a lot of sense because a lot of times people look at things and they don't realize there's a lot of you need the supporting
the pillars behind it.
foundations. Yeah,
Exactly right.
if you don't have it, then that's not gonna do it. So
Yeah.
that's the people get tunnel vision, I think, on their project. They like, well, I'm focused on this, and
Yeah,
then
and then it's like a one-legged stool. You got to have three legs. If you have three legs, it will stand. The other
yeah,
thing that most people don't really think about is they want to be a published author, but they don't really want to write a book. But the process of writing a book is so valuable because as you struggle on your own book, or you maybe work with somebody like me who helps you write the book, you get more clear, you get more articulate. And then as your ideas get honed and more precise, then it's easy to go on podcasts because you've spent the time to develop
right. It's
your
like your muscle
ideas.
memory. Like you've done the work. Like once you've done,
Exactly.
then you should be able to go to that TED talk, show up on a podcast, do an interview on a radio show,
Yeah.
go on TV. Because like if you like you don't have imposter syndrome, you did the work,
You did the work.
right?
It's like reps at the gym. You did the heavy lifting. So, although anybody could write a book, so few do because they don't want to work out at the gym. They don't want to do the heavy lifting. But there's so much value in struggling to get that clarity. It actually rewires your brain. Here's a fun thing that's actually in the book, Turn Words into Wealth. A lot of people avoid struggle, but there's no growth in the comfort zone, as my mother would often tell me. And one of my heroes, I don't know if you know who David Goggins is, you probably do,
Mm.
the super athlete, ultra marathon runner, Navy SEAL. He wrote a book called Can't Hurt Me. Anyway, in the book that I wrote, Turn Words into Wealth, I talk about David Goggins and how he said that the struggle itself changed him. And actually, from a neuroscience point of view, that really is true. The only time that we lay down new myelin is when we are not in our comfort zone. If we're
Mhm.
in our comfort zone, we're not growing new brain cells. But when we're struggling on the edge of our comfort zone, even the little bit of struggle it takes for you and I to be articulate is enough to grow more brain cells, and you can grow more brain cells at any time. And when you are focusing with intention to be your best, that's putting down myelin. And the difference can be profound in both physical or verbal or any kind of activity, mental activity. The myelin can go from 2 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour or even faster. So that means you can do more than 10x. You can 100x your mental capacity by choosing to struggle. So the little bit of struggle that my clients experience as I'm helping them get clear and articulate what it is exactly that they want to say actually changes their brain in a way that permanently speeds it up. So then
That
they're
makes a
more
lot of sense
articulate. Yeah. I
because
mean,
a lot of
you've done
times, like,
1,000 podcasts. Your brain must be hyper fast at podcast stuff.
yeah, because I mean, I was not comfortable being a public speaker most of my life, and then
Uh-huh.
I got into it because I was kind of shy. But the first thing I did is I got into actually singing my own songs, which took a long time.
Ah,
I wrote songs, but then I never sang them. Then I started to write and sing my own material. And then I
okay.
said, well, if I can do that, why can't I do a podcast? So then I got into
Right.
podcasting, and it just over time is like I kept on showing up, and then
Showing
because of
up.
those, if you show up and you realize like the first 10 episodes probably weren't that good, right? So with some people, most people give up after
Most
like
people
10,
give up. Yeah.
and they're like, oh, they weren't any good, so I'm done.
Right.
Instead, I looked at it and said, well, why not keep on doing this? Because I like the idea of it. And
Yeah.
so then I just decided to actually make it part of my life.
Yeah.
And then just like the music, like if you're a musician, you practice your bass, you practice your piano, you continually push yourself. Like eventually, like with a lot of musicians, you go into genres that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
You go from bebop to fusion. You go from like
Yeah.
you go from like a pop music to like progressive rock. You try to do it like a Yes song or something. It's like you
You
push
stretch
yourself
yourself. You push
and
yourself. You
the
lay down more
type.
myelin.
Yeah, and if you do that, you start to get capabilities where it's like, oh, what if I cross this with that?
Yeah.
If you just stayed in one lane, you would never think to cross,
Yeah.
punk with fusion,
Yeah. And then
or
you make
disco
something
with
hybrid.
classical. Like, why would you ever think to do it if you don't try to push yourself into, like what Bo used to say? He used to like to tread water creatively to force himself into areas that he wasn't the best at.
Who said
And
that?
David Bowie, he has a
Oh,
comment
that's
where he
great.
talked about like as an artist, I constantly put myself into situations where I was treading water.
Ah.
I was actually going into like I've done Ziggy Stardust, and then I go and do an album with Luther Vandross, where I could have kept on just doing a rock thing, but I
Mm-hmm.
go and try to force myself to sing at a level with a guy like a Luther Vandross. Then you're like,
Wow.
well, that
See, David
changed
Bowie
my
can
whole
be an
choice.
inspiration to us all because growing more capabilities is so good. And I just want to break that thought that some people may still have that, you're educated once you get out of school or once you get out of college. No, you got to be a lifelong
This means
learner.
you're breaking
Things
the
are,
rules. You
yeah,
learn what they told you in the canon, and then you say, why can't I do it like the way they said I couldn't do it? Like,
exactly.
go to
That's being
Berkeley and
a
they always
creator.
they tell you like, well, now you learned all music theory, now go break the theories, right?
That's
Because
right.
that's what you should do. Because that's the only way you're going to progress is like if they tell you can't do it, like why not?
Yeah.
Why
But
can't
you
I
do have
invert
to
it?
learn them first.
You have to learn it first. Yeah, but then you start to play with like inverting things and
Yeah,
breaking things up into.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That is definitely a recipe for going the wrong way. If you've never written anything, you've never published anything, and then you think you're going to break all the rules, that might not be your first out the gate
No,
choice.
not out the gate, but like if you've
But once
been
you're trained, go for
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Absolutely.
just to figure out your style, to figure out who you are, you
Hmm.
start to challenge and maybe be waiting in the deeper end of the pool, just to
Exactly.
see like, can I do it? Can I
And I
actually?
do. Well,
Yeah,
you mentioned the word challenge, so I want to give the audience a 90-day challenge, which I also mention in the back of Turd Words into Wealth. If you forget what I say, you can go grab the book. So I think that if you do these three things for the next 90 days, your life will change. And when I first did this, I was amazed by the difference. So the three things are simple and they don't even need to take more than about 5 minutes a day. So read every day, read something for 5 minutes. I suggest you read something spiritual or inspirational, or it could be a nonfiction book, or it could be a great fiction book. It could be something really short, like the Tao Te Ching. Could be Rudyard Kipling. Could be the poem "If." I don't know, whatever speaks to you. But read every day. Make it a practice to do it just before bed or upon waking, so that you have a specific time of day that you do it, or maybe you always do it on your lunch break. But make a habit of it. And then second habit is write every day. Again, it only needs to be for 5 minutes. So I recommend that you have a journal and that you just write. You can either just vent, what happened yesterday or what's on your heart or what's on your mind, or it could be an intention for the day. I love to invite people to write down. If you can't think of anything that's really pressing to write, just write three things that you're grateful for. Writing down three things that you're grateful for every day will change your night, will gradually change your whole life, because it will attract more things to be grateful for, and your vibration will you'll be emanating like, this is a grateful
Law of
person. Who
attraction.
doesn't want to
Let's
be
say the law of
around?
attraction. If you go,
Exactly. Okay,
yeah,
and then
that's a
the
good idea.
third thing, so now you've read every day and you've written every day, but those things 5 minutes each, is once a week, probably on Sunday, if you have a regular schedule like most people and you have Sundays off, is review what you read and what you wrote, and just reflect and kind of notice. Have you been whining all week about something? Have you been grateful all week about something? If you had a grateful week, did something really cool happen on Friday that was kind of unexpected? If you were whining all week, did something awful happen on Thursday because you were, sending out those whiny vibes? And whatever book you were reading, what stood out to you, and just just one page. Write about those two things. What happened? And if you do this over time, you will be amazed. I was blown away when I first did this. I this is going to change the topic a bit, but my husband died suddenly when he was 33 years old and our son was 4. I'd always been a big reader and I'd always been keeping a journal ever since I was a kid. But the thing I didn't do was reread my journal. But then I added that extra step. See, there's a reason for that extra step. And what I was blown away with, it moved me to tears, was how many times my prayers had been answered. How many times I just been in the muck or in the mire or just like, God, help me, show me the way. And the way would be revealed. Some help would come from unexpected sources. But because in my case, maybe I journaled a month earlier and then a month later seemed like a year later because I was grieving. So time was, weird. I didn't connect until I
go back and
reread
review it. Oh, yeah.
When I went back and reviewed it, then I'm like, wow, what you put out there, if you ask for help sincerely, it can be amazing that your prayers are answered. Or if you're not a praying person, like, the God of your understanding, or your intentions are answered. I think, we are intentional, creative beings, and whatever you intend tends to happen. And be careful with your brain. Be careful when you point that thing. It's loaded.
Yeah.
So if you point it towards gratitude, you'll get more of that. If you point it toward resentment, bitterness, and anger,
get more of that law of attraction. You get what you get.
What's your experience? Have you experienced that?
As an artist, I journal. I have all kinds of recorders, and so I record like everything, and then I go back. And I go and I look at it. Sometimes I'll go back like a month. Sometimes I'll go back 6 months. I'll go back a couple of years.
Yeah.
Something that actually make me go back and work on it. Because at the time I did it, I might like, this is no good.
Yeah.
But I kept it.
Yeah.
But then at the moment I'm in now, somehow I find it. I'm kind of a Buddhist, so I believe in the law of attraction. Somehow it got pulled to me. Right. For some reason, I go grab that, and I'm like, oh, now's the moment that this should be worked on.
Yeah.
And then and it just seems to come to, it's kind of like foo-foo. Like, but like if you live in a life where you're willing to let the muse kind of guide you,
yeah,
and if things happen, and you're not going to worry about it. You say, okay, that's supposed to happen. Then things do happen. Like if you have that kind of positive outlook.
Exactly.
That you in the positive outlook is that the fact that I recorded it and I didn't throw it away.
Exactly.
Because a lot of
times it's a
at
seed.
The moment, yeah, you might say, well, it's garbage, and then you don't keep it.
Well, it's like a seed. Like whether you write something down or whether you record something on an audio or a video, if you don't throw it away, it can become like a seed, and then it can germinate later. I mean, that's one thing I love about books. I think that books are like telepathy that can time travel. But books, unlike people, can be immortal, right? A book can sit on the shelf and it germinates when somebody opens the pages. It's like when you open the pages of a book, it's like you're watering the seeds and it grows just for you. That's
like William Blake.
Cool.
Like anything about William Blake and the Sons of Innocence and Experience. In his time, nobody knew he wrote that. It got found after his death. Right? He was one of the greatest Victorian poets, but nobody ever read any William Blake really until he was gone.
Wow.
And he became one of the greatest Victorian poets because he actually took his poems and he etched them in metal.
Wow.
in pieces of, like, they found them in a farmhouse. And
that's a good way to be immortal. Etch them in metal. I got to work on that.
Actually, he drew pictures that go with each poem. In the Songs of Experience and Innocence actually have like a painting and etched in metal work that go with the poem. Most of the people learn the poems, but they never see the painting. They never see the etching.
Wow.
And it's like he couldn't market himself in that time, but he felt his work was important enough that he etched it in metal. So that tells you where his head was at.
That is so cool. Well, Phantom, you mentioned a minute ago about not throwing your scraps of audio away, and there was some reason for that. And it can be so tempting to throw our work away. Stephen King, I remember in his book on writing, he talks about his big break as an author. So he and his wife were both working at miserable jobs. I think he was working at a dry cleaning place or something really chemically and yucky, working long hours, and they were living in a hovel. And he wrote something, wrote four pages, and then he threw it in the trash because he thought this was the worst crap ever and didn't deserve to see the light of day. And his wife fished it out and smoothed the pages and read it. She's like, no, this is good. I think you should work on this. So with that encouragement, he did work on it. And later he sent it to his agent, as he had sent his agent many other things. And he'd got, short stories published here or there for $25 or whatever. And the agent said, are you sitting down? And he's like, no, why should I be? And it was like one of those corded phones in the kitchen, where you couldn't reach the seat. It's not where you got the AirPods and the iPhone. Yeah. And the agent said, well, I really think you should be sitting down. And he's going, I guess another pass. Anyway, they told him the offer was $600,000. And I believe, I might be wrong about which book it was. I think it was Carrie, but I could be wrong about
that's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah, I remember that.
And that changed his life. Like that was the first big
You never
deal.
know. That's a lot of times I tell the young people, like, you keep so many things to yourself as an artist, right? Like the artist with the gallery, like the loft has all these paintings, and they said they're not ready to go to the gallery.
Yeah.
And like, because they just don't believe it, because limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
It's like you got to be willing to put stuff out there, because if you don't, like, you have no idea. A lot of times artists aren't good judges of their own work.
Oh, we have no clue.
And so it's
Let
like
the marketplace tell you.
The things that you think aren't going to work are like, that's the thing that's going to work. And then you never put it in the world and nobody finds it.
Yeah. And then we get all precious about something else and that doesn't work because we overthought it or whatever. The timing was wrong. Yeah. Let this other, I have an MBA, so we got to, study these interesting things. And they did this experiment. I forget which university did it, but anyway, it was a photography class. And your mark either was going to be, you just had to produce the best photo and you just had to have one, and that was going to be your mark. Or your mark was exclusively for the volume of photos you produced. And they didn't have to be good. You just had to have a bunch of them. And so they had this, control group. One class was really trying to do the best photo, absolutely committed to that. They got really precious about their work and kind of constipated about it. And then the other group was snapping photos and just having a wild old time. And what happened was the group that were encouraged to take the most photos and share the most photos and get feedback on the most photos, they got better. And by the end, they had the best photos as well. So there is something to be said for just churning it out there and letting people respond, and then you get better.
You throw it at the wall. I mean, there's some things about editing, but the way that social media is today and the way the internet is today, you have no idea like what you do suddenly hits in Australia or hits in New Zealand or hits,
you have no clue.
If you don't, just because it doesn't hit in your hometown,
right,
or where you live, doesn't mean it's not valid. And that's just where the world is so big now that you are kind of, I know a lot of artists is like suddenly they can go to Japan and they get a big audience, but when they're here, they can't, right? Or they go.
Well, Jesus had that problem too, right?
Yeah, it can just happen. I mean, you can end up, having an audience you didn't even expect, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, and like let's use David Goggins as an example, just as a contrast with Jesus, in case that I want to appeal to all people here. So, but yes, nobody I think is a hero in their hometown. That's very rare, even if you walk on water. But David Goggins is not what you would normally think would be a best-selling author. He's dyslexic. He did very poorly in school. He was told he could never write anything. He did work with a ghostwriter. And so, the words it's all his stories and his thoughts, but the ghostwriter wrote it and he acknowledged that. But he really believed in his message. He went to New York and an agent told him, that he could probably get him a deal, but then he would have to turn over the rights to his life story. and he couldn't edit or control his own life story. And he's like, I'm not going to give somebody else control over my life story. That's not happening. And the agent said, well, if you self-publish it, you'd be lucky if you sell 5,000 copies. But David Goggins went on podcast after podcast. He believed in his message. He was a good talker. And that book has sold over 1 million copies. I think 600,000 copies of the audiobook were sold within a year of publication. So that agent who told him that he'd be lucky if he sold 5,000 copies was wrong, to the tune of maybe $20,000, $20 million. Just guessing.
People don't know, they assume there's the current state of what things are, and then there's you, right? And then the secret sauce is always you.
The secret sauce is always you. And what are you willing to do? Are you willing to talk about it? Are you willing to go on podcasts or TED Talk? Are you willing to write the book even? Are you willing to take a stand?
If you believe in yourself, it's kind of like a Buddhist kind of idea. But like if you believe in yourself and you put out that energy, the law of attraction is going to actually put the opportunities around you.
Exactly.
But if you go down to yourself, then you're going to stay with that down.
Exactly right. And I would add a little extra flavor to that, because I think whether we believe ourselves or we don't believe in ourselves is important. But if we can devote ourselves or be a stand for something even bigger than us, then we are invincible. Like, I really care about the book Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse because I think it has the power to help young people choose to be better, choose to have better relationships with their siblings, choose to take care of planet Earth, choose to go, you know what, I'm not going to buy into this whole cancel culture idea. And yet it's a fun, engaging story. It's not like a political statement or anything. Well, it's a hidden political statement, I guess. So I can show up here today. Hopefully everybody got value from the podcast, but then I'm going to urge people, go to Kickstarter and follow me on Kickstarter or get the book Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse, because it's really not about me. I'm hoping that this book series will be a seed that will be like a Jack and the Beanstalk seed that will help people become heroic and become their best selves.
Well, if you can encourage other young people to get into writing and get into reading first, and then get so inspired to say, well, why couldn't I get into this too? Exactly. Which I think is the whole point of any artist, is like a lot of times that you don't want to just be the only one. You want to be able to build like a collective or build a community and then see where it goes. So, that's the value add. You can kind of pay it forward. But I appreciate you being a guest on the Family Liquid Goes podcast. It always goes by quicker than we ever imagined. But
it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. I really
appreciate your time tonight, and it was really great. I want people to go to your Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse.com and check out the book. From there they can get to the Kickstarter.
Yeah, there's a link there for them to go to the Kickstarter, and it's free to follow on Kickstarter. Then you'll just see what's happening with the books, and you'll get a chance to get beautiful hardcover books of book 1 and book 2. You could also get the ebook, and you can get all kinds of special stuff that's not available anywhere else. But you do need to follow on Kickstarter, which means you need to have a Kickstarter account. And hopefully everybody who's listening to this podcast supports creators. So I thought that would be a great thing for them. And if they want to know,
a lot of artists, they probably have that. Hopefully a lot of musicians have their own Kickstarters with fantasy, and check it out. Because
please do.
And I do encourage everybody to check that out and click on the link and follow up. But thank you again for being a guest. We always appreciate your time. And again, this has been live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We'll be published on all the major podcasts where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Phantom. It was awesome.